This episode of Grounded in Maine is sponsored by ESG Review. ESG Review magazine is published quarterly in February, May, August, and November, and is available for free in print and digital formats. ESG Review is devoted to environmental, social, and governance strategies, technologies, and investments. ESGreview.net is updated every Wednesday with 8 new stories and is home to feature articles, news items, and more. Visit esgreview.net to stay informed and help us spark the collaboration and awareness needed to develop sustainable economies and communities around the world.
There's a place where there's no trouble, no more pain, no more struggle.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys think about this episode. I learned so much. I'm speaking with Bill Yeo, who he lives off grid and he is an adventurer to the max. He was telling me that he's been speaking for like 35 years about adventuring and biking and sustainability. We're going to learn a lot. Anyway, here is Bill. I hope you enjoy it. Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy. I'm talking with Bill Yeo, who is, he lives off grid, but he also works for LL Bean, which is a big time business in our area. They do a lot of, I'm not going to say homesteading or sustainability, but they do a lot of like outdoor activity, sales, equipment, clothes, etc. So, Bill, how are you today? Thank you so much for being here.
I'm doing great, Amy. Thanks for inviting me.
And this is not your first podcast. I've been made aware.
Yeah, no, I've done a couple different podcasts here and there, and for years I still have a lecture series where I speak, all around different locations, primarily in the Northeast, but I've presented all over the country.
Wow. What do you usually speak about?
A lot of times I speak about adventure and expeditions that I conduct, but I have done lectures about sustainability, which I've presented for Patagonia before, and
Awesome.
off-grid living, which I've presented for them. And I've done, and regarding sustainability, I've done lectures at a number of locations about atmospheric deposition and research I've conducted on trace metal findings in snow and soil, which is transported through the atmosphere by fossil burning generation facilities. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's definitely something I have not thought about. Interesting. Very cool. And so your position is like community marketing, sponsorship.
Oh, yeah. So at LL Bean, I manage our community engagement program. And so I work with all of our corporate partners and a lot of our organizations that we sponsor. Yeah, all over New England.
That's cool.
With a heavy focus on Maine.
Yeah. And then in your off time, so clearly, I mean, you're an adventurer. So
yeah.
Are you typically a hiker, biker? Does it not matter as long as you're outside and doing something?
I am an adventurer, and most of my adventures focus around climbing big mountains, backcountry skiing, some Arctic skiing expeditions, a lot of bike packing trips all over the world, and just general exploration, a lot of travel. And so I present a lot of talks about that, like climbing some of the biggest mountains in the world, climbing the 7 summits. I do different talks about that, climbing, and do talks about climbing in the Andes, climbing in Alaska, and all different talks, which I've done for over 35 years. I've done talks about that.
Oh my gosh, that's really cool. I'm going to totally have to hook you up with my husband. He just did He just went biking in Colorado on the Colorado Trail, I guess.
Wait, I did the Colorado Trail 2 years ago.
Cool.
Huh.
And a few
That's a
years
hell of a
ago,
ride.
yeah, it was interesting. And I don't bike at all, so I'm just getting it secondhand. But
Yeah.
and a few years ago, he went to Czech Republic, and in April, I think he's going to South Korea, and
To
all for
to go
biking.
bike packing?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to chat with him.
Yeah, and he will as well. Because and we've climbed not big mountains, but it was big for me. We went to Alaska a few years ago and we climbed Flat Top Mountain.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm not sure where that is, but Alaska is one of my favorite places on earth. I've spent probably over a year of my life climbing mountains in Alaska.
oh my gosh, very cool. And then but at home um, you live off grid. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how did that happen and what does that mean?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's actually kind of ties in what we were just talking about. 35 years ago, I was bike packing Central America. And the whole trip, I kept talking to my brother and saying, I don't believe I'm paying rent while I'm on this trip, because it was like a 2.5 month trip. And
Oh,
I said, when I get home, I'm going to search all around Maine for a nice piece of land and I'm going to move on to the land. And so, when you're biking 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you do a lot of thinking. And I'm thinking about, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to build. And I put it all together in my mind. And when
oh
I
my
got home,
gosh.
I took one of the old Delore maps and I marked off all the pieces of land that were for sale within a radius around LL Bean because I was
Wow.
still working at LL Bean. And eventually found one that I liked and I bought it. And I moved out there in my wall tent. So I lived in my tent while I was building my off-grid house.
Very cool. So you did it
And
yourself with your own
yeah,
hands.
I did. And I had a friend that was a plumber that lived down the road, and he'd come over with us on his spare time and just help me. And we built a 12 by 16 cabin. And I moved in there. I remember the first winter, I didn't even have a wood stove or any heat in there. So I did half of that winter in my tent and then half the winter in that cabin without any heat.
Holy.
And it was chilly. I was a coach at Bowdoin College at the time, so it was nice because I did have the
One
coach's locker room. I could go in and shower and stuff once in a while. But
they would like that. They would appreciate
they sure did.
yeah.
They sure did. Yeah, yeah. So that made it easier. But I built this simple cabin and kept a real light footprint. It was about over a quarter mile into the woods. So I made a little trail and a couple footbridges. And, I'd often work at LL Bean in the bike shop, sometimes late into the evening. And then I'd get home, I'd park my car out by the road and I'd hike into my cabin. And I'm still at that same location, but it's, I since built a house next to that cabin, but I've been off grid the whole time. I've been off grid for, I think, 31 years now in that same location.
Wow. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Um and so is that cabin now like a man cave or is it in-law apartment or something like that? Does it have
Yeah,
heat
that's a
now?
great question. So it always was going to be an art studio, but we never
Oh.
really got around to making the art studio. But it is full of all kinds of audio equipment and keyboards and all that. And my drums were out there. And sometimes I'll have friends come out and we'll jam out there. So it's kind of a sound studio in a way, but
Oh my gosh.
right now it's more storage, but multi-purpose.
Oh my
For a
gosh.
while, I had some friends from Nepal. I was on an expedition in Nepal, and it's a long story, but to make it real short, I met this Nepali guy, and I had him come home with me, and I had him move into the cabin. He lived there for 2 years.
That's
And
awesome.
I've had friends from all over the world living in my cabin. I've had a Russian living there. I had my climbing partner from Sweden live there. And it's just been a great kind of a halfway house for adventurers.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's like a spare bedroom that's not like in your space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so then you get to, yeah, I love that. That's very cool. Um, wow. And my husband plays guitar too, and he loves jamming. So,
Oh,
aha.
geez. Yeah. We need to meet.
Wow.
We definitely have to meet.
Yeah, I will hook you guys up. Um, okay, so you figured this out while you were biking in South America, and you put it together yourself. So what exactly does living off grid mean?
So living off grid, in my mind, means that you're not connected to the utility grid in any way. So basically, you're not receiving any power or input from CMP, and you're probably also not connected with a phone line. And so you're completely off that, what we all call the grid. So
Okay.
most homes had a phone line. Of course, they don't now, but almost every home does have a connection to central main power in some way. So you're
Right.
living independently, you're storing your own power generally into a battery bank. And then you can draw on that bank throughout the day and at night.
Okay. I did talk to a couple of folks a few weeks ago who also live off grid, and it was sort of not not necessarily their choice. They just bought this house that was set up for that, and I was totally impressed by when they said that they still had electricity like banked up through like what, like February maybe, something like that. Like the electricity that they make during the summer will last them through a good chunk of the winter. Whereas
Hmm.
I have solar panels and we are tied to the grid, and we're already like our electric bill has quadrupled in the last month, I think.
Oh, because
It's
it's
just
getting
because of the
colder.
lack of sun.
Yeah, yeah,
So that sounds
yeah.
like a pretty sweet gig, but I'm sure, I mean, I think you were saying that there are like pros and cons to that.
There certainly are, and I'd be fascinated to know how they're storing that much power for that long if they're not connected to the grid. You
Same.
know, there's no battery system that could store power, that much power for that long. So
I do
yeah,
not
I
know.
mean there are systems where you can pump water up into a tower or up on a hill somewhere, and then have that drop down from the hill over time, to store that energy. But boy, I don't know how they're storing power for months on end. I can only store power in my batteries. It only lasts us 3 days, something like that. And Maine is a phenomenal place for sun. We have 4.5 hours, average hours per day of sun for the year, which is pretty darn good.
Right.
But if we go 3 days without any sun, which occasionally we do, I'm out of power. And then I have a backup generator that I have to kick on. I only have to kick that thing in, 3 or 4 times all winter, not that often, you know.
Right.
But when the solar panels get covered with snow and you can't get up on the roof to shovel them off or something, it's just nice to have a backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we have a generator too that we have to put on ourselves. But
Mm.
we have to turn, we usually use it at least a couple times during the winter, so it's not that different. I I would love to pick your brain about that more. I'm very curious about living off grid, and it's not that I don't, you know, like to be connected, but it's just an interesting
Yeah. I
thing.
mean, I have never seen a CMP bill. I always said I never want to be connected with them. I have no
Yeah.
interest, and I don't intend on ever having one. But we'll see. If I ever build another place and I end up going grid tie, which as we said, there are pros and cons. Being grid tied, I think it's a great way to go, because battery banks do take quite a bit of maintenance, and especially if you have a lead acid battery bank. If you have lead acid, you've got to add water to those batteries every 2 to 3 months. And if you have a huge battery bank, you're going to be putting, you know, between 8 and 12 gallons of water in those batteries every few months if you have a real big battery bank and you're using it a lot. That's a lot of distilled water, and it
You,
takes some time.
it takes, I, um, okay, yeah, I clearly know nothing about that. But so you have to put water in your batteries?
Hmm. Yeah. Yep.
What?
Yeah. So what happens is when batteries are charging, the hydrogen is off gas. So you have to vent your battery bank, and then the hydrogen will go out through the door, well, actually through your vent. But you get in your electrons, from that water,
Uh,
from the change. Yeah,
okay. All right.
yeah.
It's been a while. It's been a while since I did that whole thing. Cool. Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Um, oh, I had a question. Um, but so living off grid. So, okay, the folks that I talked to a few weeks ago, they were like, everything is the same. We still have internet. We still, have cell phones and whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, it's maybe like, um, fairy tale is not the right word, but like myth maybe that if you live off grid, you're like, and this was how I totally thought about it before I talked to them, is like you're like camping all the time, um,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
not, right?
It's not. And that's what people think because, years ago in the 70s and 80s, people had pretty small solar systems, but now you can build these monster solar systems, and products are much more efficient thanks to the Energy Star program. You've got refrigerators that are far more efficient because that used to be one of your biggest users of electricity.
Right.
And
And now
so
it's
you can,
microwaves.
yeah, yeah, even microwaves aren't too bad. So I run all the standard appliances that you do. And when people come over, they all don't even know I'm off grid. I
Yeah.
run the dishwasher and all that. But what you do is you become aware about when you should run these. And like, I don't do laundry at night. I do laundry in the middle of the winter. I just do laundry when the sun's out. But the rest of the year, I do laundry anytime, you know. But this time of year, so December and January, those are your real low sun, your dark times. That's when I'm just careful about like maybe not running the toaster a lot if it's not sunny, and the other big uses of energy such as laundry and water pumping. I'm
Mm.
just a little more careful with those.
Mm-hmm.
But solar systems have come way down in price. When I built my first solar system 30 years ago, I'm trying to remember, but I think it was like $5 a watt or something like that. And now you're down way below. You're at like 79 cents a watt or something like that. Yeah. So
Cool.
it's far more cheaper per watt, and you can build a way bigger system, and it's fairly economical. So yeah. So
Right.
it's more viable. And I remember when I first moved off grid, everyone was saying like, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't get enough electricity, and you're not going to be able to run anything." And they really thought I'd be roughing it, but I was always super comfortable. And now I've built up my system so it's a little bit bigger, and um, I would never go back. I mean, I
Yeah.
really have all the luxuries I need. And when you shop for appliances, you buy the best that Energy Star has. Like you look at how many watts it consumes for everything you buy. You're just careful that way,
Right.
and make your house really efficient, super well insulated, and all my decisions that I make regarding purchases and appliances for the home, you just regard the efficiency first. You can
Right. Well,
totally
which
do it.
is, that's kind of the whole point. Is if, well, I mean, living off grid is a point for sure, but then, you want to not use all of that energy right away. So efficiency would totally tie into that and makes sense.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Energy efficiency is always your best bang for the buck.
yeah.
If you want to be more sustainable, the best thing you can do is go around your house or have someone conduct an energy audit for your house, and then, fill in all those infiltration and exfiltration points around your house. Like caulking windows and doing extra insulation in the attic. That'll all pay back within a year or some year or two. It pays back quickly, and then it's money in the bank. And plus, you'll be far more comfortable in your house.
Hmm. For sure. That's actually really great advice. Thank you. And so I'm curious, Bill, how many solar panels do you have? And you clearly have like electric and hot water, or is it just how do you heat your water with electric?
So what I do is I have propane, which does instantaneous water heating. So I use that for all the radiant heat in the floors because I've got radiant heat in the cellar, the first floor, and the second floor. And then I have the same boiler does instantaneous domestic hot water heat. So it heats the water, turns on when the faucet turns on, and that's for showering and doing dishes and all that. That's a pretty efficient way to go. And although now that solar energy is even cheaper, a lot of people are using electric water heaters now.
Yeah,
And of course, as things advance in that realm, I want to move away from fossil fuels as much as possible.
right.
Like someday, right now, I'm using propane to heat my radiant floors. And what I want to do is put a ground source heat pump in and use that to heat my floors in the future. That's my goal.
Is that
And
geothermal? Is that what that's called?
well, there's a number of different geothermal is a form of that, and you can take your heat from the earth, you can take your heat from water, or you can take your heat from the air. And most people these days are buying the heat pumps that you're taking the heat out of the air. And if you think about the air being, say it's 25 degrees like it was this morning, trying to take heat from
Right.
25 degrees,
Is not
there just isn't
efficient.
that much of it, right? But if you take heat from the earth temperature is always 55 degrees. So you're already
Oh,
starting with all that extra heat that's in the ground. It's a constant temperature. It's always 55. Your air temperature obviously fluctuates dramatically from day to day.
right.
So the ground source heat pump, I think, is a great way to go. It's just expensive if you don't have a backhoe and you can't do your own excavating, but it's I think going to be more popular and more common in the future. People are starting to put those in more
That's
regularly.
that's so smart. That makes I never really thought about it that way. That's
Yeah,
cool.
just another project for me someday. I have a backhoe. I've got a plan. I've got it all worked out. When am I going to get time? Like that means I can't ride my bike and I can't go hiking for quite a while because I got to hook this all up. But it's going to happen.
I'd love to see your plans. Not that it would make sense to me, like not that I would understand it, but just to see. I'm just so people like you that can just make stuff up and think that up in your head, with research obviously, like I want to see it. I want to see how that works
Yeah.
because
Well,
it does
Amy, I
not
bet
work
Yeah,
in my
I
head.
bet a lot of your listeners would love this website, and I recommend it to people all the time. It's called builditsolar.com. And you can go in there, and if you want to build anything, any sustainable systems, renewable systems, you go in there and they have a lot of shareware, downloadable plans, pictures, step-to-step pictures on anything you want to make. And it's an awesome site. It's a great place to share and to save a ton of money because you can do most of this yourself.
Cool. Wow, that's awesome. I'm totally going to share that. I guess that was all I had. that was all I, it was that's really great. I that's so much more information than I had gotten from and I think it's just because now I have a little bit more experience. But when we were talking to Revision Energy that put our solar panels in, they were talking to me and it was just like way over my head. I'm like, okay, you think that's a good idea? Cool, let's do that.
Yeah, you got to be able to speak to your audience. And you asked me how many solar panels I have.
Oh yeah,
Instead of the number of solar panels, I usually tell people
the
that
wattage.
I have a 4.3 kilowatt system, so 4,300 watts, which isn't that big, Amy, which is really interesting. Like when I put my first system in 30 years ago, I had, what did I have? 300 watts on my cabin. And all I could do is use that just for lighting, basically.
Right. Wow.
And so now I'm at 4,300. and you can just do so much more with that. And of course, back then panels only came in, a lot of them were like 50 watts, or 75 watts was considered the bigger panel. And now solar panels you can buy regularly that are 350, 375, 400-watt panels. So these are 6-foot tall panels, 6 foot
Right.
by 2 or 3 feet wide. They're huge, probably what you put on your house.
Mm-hmm.
So they just keep advancing. Now the challenge is that solar panels are not much more efficient than they were, say, 40 years ago. And that's the challenge that everyone's trying to break through. Like years and years ago, panels were about 12% efficient. Now the real good ones are pushing like 18, 19% efficient.
Wow.
So they still have a long way to go in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do you have, and I'm thinking back on the conversation that I had a few weeks ago. I think they have solar panels on like their chicken coop, but then they also have one of those, you're the only one that can see me doing this, but so like on a stand, and they can turn it to face the sun, wherever the sun
Oh,
might be. Do
yeah,
you have
sure.
that kind of setup, or is it just on your roof?
No, I don't. I've got them just mounted up on the roof. And, I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't really want to look out the window and just see that in front of the window, because I really like looking out at the woods, looking at the snow and the trees, and watching
Right.
our animals. We live on a farm, watching all the animals wandering around the yard and stuff. I love that, you know.
Ooh.
And if I put one of those arrays there, it'd kind of block that. But I do really like those. They have units called trackers, and those solar panels will follow the sun throughout the day.
Crazy.
And they use just a little bit of electricity to track the sun. They're really nice, but you do pay quite a bit more to have that tracker. So
Okay.
that's kind of the downside, but they're pretty efficient.
That sounds it. What do
Yeah.
you have for animals on your farm?
Oh, we have chickens, ducks, rabbits, goats, alpaca,
Oh my gosh.
horse, fish. I'm probably forgetting something, but we got 4 cats and a dog.
That
Yeah, so
sounds
quite a few
awesome.
animals running around. And some of the animals, like the alpaca, it's been 3 or 4 years since it's ever been behind a fence. It just roams around our property, goes wherever it wants.
Oh my
And it's been
gosh.
great. It just kind of sticks close by.
That's
And
very
it's
cool.
really, yeah, they're beautiful to look at. It just looks like a big fluffy poodle.
Yeah, for sure. So Bill, I asked this of all of my guests. When I say the word sustainability, what does that mean to you personally?
Well, whenever I think of that, I always think of seventh generation. They make all those eco products.
Mhm.
And on the back of the product, they always talk about trying to think of 7 generations ahead and what you're going to leave for them. And you think about our impact and what we do. Say that car that you drove for 300,000 miles, that car is going to be there, for the next few generations. And so I think when sustainability, I'm not just thinking of myself, I'm thinking of 7 generations, which is a long time, many generations from now. What are the impacts of what you're doing right now? What are they going to be? Like that plastic bottle that you bought that drink in, is that going to be in a landfill a few hundred years from now? It probably is, if it doesn't get recycled properly.
Right.
So I'm always just thinking of what my impacts are on the environment. And I mentioned earlier that I used to do research on atmospheric deposition, and I started by doing soil science on the Portland Peninsula in Portland. And so in Portland, what happened was Portland, Maine used to be a big smelter of metals. So all along the coastline, they're smelting these metals. And of course, matter isn't created or destroyed, right? So what happens with these metals when you're melting them at high temperatures? They go up in the atmosphere, and then it all deposits all over the Portland Peninsula. So many people in Portland have these vegetable gardens, and they're growing their food in the soil right along the drip edge of their buildings. So when all this, say, lead lands on the roof of your building and then it rains, that runs
Oh.
down the drip line of the building, it goes right into their gardens. Okay. So we tested gardens all over the Portland Peninsula and we found extremely elevated levels of lead in all the gardens.
Oh
Okay.
my
So a
gosh.
lot of people grow leafy vegetables. And what happens with leafies is that leafy vegetables like spinach really draw lead out of the soil. So you're consuming fairly high, spinach fairly high in lead content, which is very obviously very unhealthy, right? So our project was to remediate all that soil. So we planted spinach in all these gardens all around the city and let it draw all
Oh.
the soil to pull the lead out of the soil to remediate the soil. So that was like the first project that I worked on through the University of Southern Maine, and that got me real interested in soil science and
So
working on that. But anyway,
that's
the reason I
that's
mentioned
very
that is,
cool.
yeah. So we're talking about our impacts. These smelters were 150 or more years ago. A long time ago when they're doing all this smelting. But those impacts, it's a legacy contaminant. The lead is going to be in the soil forever, and so it's just not sustainable to operate that way. So
Hmm.
I just use that as an example. Everything we do has its impacts, and
Right.
we try to choose the least impactful method for whatever we do. And I look at that as trying to be more sustainable.
For sure. Oh, I love that. And so I'm just to go back with that just a tiny bit. So you planted spinach to absorb a lot of the lead. What happened then? I mean, because you can't, can you compost that? I mean, compost all that spinach and then just have the lead be in there? How do you
Yeah.
dispose?
No, so what we do is the university and the EPA and different organizations, the DEP, they have special methods for disposing of contaminants.
Okay.
And, like you could, if you want to combust almost anything, you can develop specific filtration to take those contaminants out of the smokestack where it's going.
Hmm.
So if you want to actually combust those spinach samples that have a lot of lead, you could have specific filtration that would take that lead right out. And then, yes, then they'd put that probably into a special sealed storage area in the ground, where it wouldn't leach into a water bed or water table or anything like that.
Right.
So, yeah, so you have it disposed of properly instead of like your car. You're driving your car around the city, the tailpipe emissions just go randomly all over the atmosphere, right?
Mm.
But if you were running a vehicle and the tailpipe went into one of these specially constructed smokestacks, you could filter out all those contaminants properly and then dispose of them properly, instead of just having people breathe it in or actually consume it, through the soil in their garden. So
Hmm.
it's just more controlled.
Wow.
Mm.
Cool. Well, Bill, oh my gosh, this has been so interesting. I learned so much and I really appreciate your time. If somebody, do you have a social presence that someone could follow you or no?
No, I don't,
Okay.
Amy. I'm not a Luddite either. Like I do embrace technology, but I just get so busy that I don't really have much time to do anything
Okay.
socially like that, through social channels. But I'm happy to share, any info. And, if you want, we can connect and I can give you some good information on where people can buy their solar systems and their components. And, since I've done this for quite a while, I might be able to help other people that are interested in either going off grid or just trying to clean up their act. I am one of
Absolutely.
LL Bean's sustainability ambassadors, so I do help with some projects within the company too.
Ah, sweet. Okay, well, very cool. So I'll just say that if anybody has questions, they can reach out to me, and I will either reach out to you or I'll share the information that you're going to share with me, and we'll figure that out.
That's great.
Cool.
Well, thanks for reaching out. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to talk more.
I
And
can't wait till I get a jam session going with your husband.
yeah, definitely. He's been going to like Kennebunk, so Your area is definitely closer. I want to take just a moment and thank some people that keep this podcast going. I need to thank Buzzsprout for hosting the podcast. Also, Jane Bolduck for her amazing music, for Becca Coffron and her fabulous artwork for the podcast. And I'd like to thank you for listening. I hope that you have a great rest of the day. I will talk to you next time.
There'll come a day, my mama told me, when I find love to have and hold me, a heart that's strong and so sincere. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? Oh, tell me, get there from here, 'cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound, yeah, to find me. We'll find a way to soothe the sickness, we'll heal the ache, with sweet forgiveness. Wages of war will disappear. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? I wonder, how do I get there from here? Yeah, 'cause here and now I'm so far down, and mercy's bound, yeah, to find me. When that state of grace has finally found me, well, there'll be music, ooh, and good friends around me, yeah, yeah. And I'll just smile through happy tears and wonder,